The ceremonial gravity mace struck the reinforced podium with a thunderous boom that rippled through the vast council chamber. Delegates from nearly 300 species fell silent, their varied appendages, sensory organs, and environmental suits creating a kaleidoscope of alien diversity. "The vote is recorded," announced High Chancellor Vex Ran, his translucent skin pulsing with red bioluminescent patterns indicating his agitation. "As of this moment, by the authority of the Galactic Council, a state of war exists between the unified species of civilized space and the Sol system inhabitants known as humans." From the upper observation ring, junior diplomatic attaché Ziv Toll of the Meridian Confluence leaned toward his colleague. "That's it. After 6 cycles of debate, they just declare war." Senior attaché Lore nodded, her eye stalks swiveling to take in the chamber. The intelligence reports were conclusive. Humans went from atmospheric flight to faster-than-light travel in less than 200 years. No species has ever advanced that quickly without outside interference. But war? We haven't even established proper diplomatic. "The Council doesn't negotiate with potential threats," Lore interrupted. "Humans are unpredictable. Their social structures make no sense. They simultaneously cooperate and compete. They create art about fictional disasters while actively preventing real ones. They're unsettling." Down on the chamber floor, representatives hurried to communication nodes, eager to inform their governments that the decision had finally been made. War material that had been stockpiling for months would now be deployed. Military vessels already in position would receive activation codes. The Council had spoken. The humans would be contained. "Mom, did you see that save? That was impossible." Ambassador Ileana Chen cheered alongside her daughter as the goalkeeper for Nigeria made yet another spectacular play in the World Cup final. The neural implant behind her ear pinged with an incoming priority message, but she dismissed it with a subtle eye movement. Nothing was interrupting this moment. The stadium roared around them, 90,000 humans united in the joy of athletic competition. Overhead, camera drones captured the action, while advertising holograms shimmered in the summer heat. A passing beverage vendor recognized the ambassador and offered a respectful nod, which Chen returned with a warm smile. Only after the match, during the drive back to the diplomatic quarter in New Singapore, did Chen finally review the message. "Play diplomatic communique," she instructed her vehicle's eye. A holographic seal of the Galactic Council appeared, rotating slowly above the dashboard. The message unfurled in formal diplomatic language, detailing the Council's grievances against humanity. Unauthorized expansion, resource consumption rates, cultural contamination risks, and most seriously, dangerously accelerated technological development. The message concluded with a formal declaration of hostilities and demands for immediate human submission to Council authority. Chen sighed, tapping her fingers against the steering wheel as her vehicle navigated autonomously through the evening traffic. Around her, the city glittered with life. Restaurants packed with dinner crowds, entertainment districts pulsing with music, and research centers humming with activity even at this late hour. "Amara," she addressed her AI assistant, "file this under Diplomatic Histrionics. Priority Level 4. Draft a standard acknowledgement of receipt. Also, forward a copy to the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs with a note that I'll provide my assessment after the Mars announcement tomorrow." "Priority 4, Ambassador," the AI responded. "The message contains formal war declarations." Chen smiled slightly, watching as a street performer entertained a group of children with holographic butterflies that seemed to fly from his fingertips. "Yes, Priority 4. If the Council actually understood humans, they'd know better than to start something like this. We're far too busy for a war right now." Admiral Kthrax stood on the command deck of the Council enforcement vessel Inevitable Justice, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional posture of a Vandaran military officer. Through the massive viewport, the human research stations orbiting Ta City hung like delicate crystalline structures against the backdrop of space. "Weapons status," he commanded, His voice modulator adjusted to project absolute confidence. "All systems optimal, Admiral," replied his weapons officer. Targeting solutions locked on all 7 human installations. Thrax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had expanded too quickly, established outposts too brazenly. Now they would learn the price of ignoring Council protocols. Fire Sequence Alpha. Record all visual data for propaganda distribution. The inevitable Justice shuddered almost imperceptibly as its antimatter torpedo tubes discharged their payload. Streams of deadly energy crossed the void, each one precisely calculated to destroy a specific human installation, while minimizing debris that might complicate the ensuing occupation. 4 of the 7 stations erupted in spectacular explosions, their outer habitation rings fragmenting into glittering shards. Emergency pods jettisoned from the structures, tiny specks shooting away from the destruction. "Impressive demonstration, Admiral," said his first officer, a Takani whose scaled skin rippled with approval. "The humans will surely recognize our technological superiority now." Thrax narrowed his primary eyes. "Why are 3 stations still intact? Recalibrate and fire again." Before his crew could comply, sensor alerts blared across the command deck. "Admiral, the remaining stations have activated some kind of field. Our targeting systems cannot maintain lock." Thrax leaned forward. "Impossible. Their defensive capabilities are at least 30 cycles behind our offensive technology." On the viewport's display, the 3 surviving stations now shimmered with a faint iridescent haze, like oil on water. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human station designated Tau Ceti Research Hub Alpha." "Put it through," Thrax ordered, anticipating pleas for mercy or offers of surrender. Instead, a tired-looking human male in a rumpled uniform appeared on the screen. He was floating in what appeared to be a station common area, casually sipping from a container while debris drifted around him. "This is Station Manager Darius Jackson," the human said, not bothering to look directly at the camera. "To whoever's firing those torpedoes, we get it. You're very impressive. Could you pause for about 20 minutes? We're still evacuating our botanical research samples, and those take time to properly secure for transport." Thrax's mandibles clicked in astonishment. "You are addressing the Council enforcement fleet. Surrender your stations immediately or face complete destruction." Jackson took another sip from his container, then checked something on his wrist device. "Yeah, about that. We're a research installation, not a military target. Pretty sure that violates about 6 different interstellar conventions." He sighed heavily. "Look, I've got about 200 scientists having absolute conniptions over their interrupted experiments. Plus, the insurance paperwork is going to be a nightmare." The human gestured toward the viewport behind him, where the shattered remains of the other stations were visible. "Those were our hydroponics facilities and living quarters. Do you have any idea how long it takes to grow a decent tomato in space? Years of agricultural research gone. This is an act of war." Thrax bellowed. "Is it?" Jackson seemed genuinely confused. "Huh. Someone should probably tell Earth then. Anyway, I'm sending you our insurance claim forms. Your fleet is listed as the responsible party. Our legal department will be in touch." He took another sip. "Oh, and fair warning. The coffee supply was on one of the stations you blew up, so morale's going to be pretty low around here until the next shipment arrives." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Thrax staring at the blank screen. "Admiral," his first officer ventured after a long silence. "Your orders." Thrax's exoskeleton creaked as he slowly turned. "Send the recording to Council High Command, and prepare a report explaining why we were unable to complete the destruction of the human facilities." "Explain this," demanded General Zulk, his massive pincers snapping with agitation as he gestured at the holographic display dominating the Council's strategic command center. The display showed human market indices over the past 14 standard cycles. The attack on Tau Ceti had occurred at point 9.3 on the timeline. The markets had dipped briefly, then immediately recovered. By cycle 10, they had actually risen beyond their pre-attack levels. Intelligence Director Feigsan's containment sphere hummed as she hovered closer to the display. Her gaseous form swirled with patterns indicating deep analytical thought. "Most curious," she said, her translation unit rendering her molecular vibrations into audible speech. "We've run 17 different behavioral models based on all known sentient response patterns. None predicted this outcome." Around the table, representatives from the Council's premier intelligence agencies shifted uncomfortably. The Canthari analyst cleared his throat sacs. "Perhaps they don't understand that we're at war." General Zulk's armored exoskeleton rattled with derision. "We destroyed half their research outpost. We formally declared war through diplomatic channels. Their ambassador confirmed receipt. And yet," Feigsan countered, projecting a new set of images onto the display, "observe their planetary information networks." The display filled with human news headlines. Superconductor breakthrough promises energy revolution. Mars discovery announcement scheduled for tomorrow. World Cup final breaks viewing records, and buried far down the priority list. Minor skirmish at Taz City Research Station. No loss of life. Their primary information sources devoted less than 0.8% of their content to our attack, Feigsan continued. Compare this to the 18.4% dedicated to this sports competition and 24.7% to scientific developments. The Strategic Command Center fell silent as the implications sank in. "Are they truly that disorganized?" asked the Triptarian security coordinator, all three of her heads frowning simultaneously. "Or is this a sophisticated form of psychological warfare?" From the shadowed corner of the room, a voice rasped, "Neither." All eyes turned to the ancient observant, a member of the Council's oldest species. The observants rarely spoke at strategic meetings, preferring to analyze rather than advise. "The humans aren't ignoring us deliberately, nor are they unaware," the observant said, moving into the light. His translucent skin revealed the complex neural pathways of his exposed brain. "They simply have different priorities." "Different priorities than survival," Zulk scoffed. "Consider," the observant continued, unperturbed, "a species that evolved on a death world, constantly threatened by predators, natural disasters, disease, and their own kind. Their history is an unbroken chain of existential threats. Their literature fixates on apocalyptic scenarios. They've lived their entire existence on the edge of annihilation." He gestured at the display. To such a species, a few destroyed outposts would register as routine, a diplomatic declaration, merely words. A chime interrupted the briefing. The display shifted to show an incoming transmission from Earth's Interstellar Relations Department. The gathered council officials watched in stunned silence as Dr. Kato Watanabe's face appeared. His message was brief, pre-recorded, and delivered with the distracted air of someone with far more important matters at hand. "Greetings, Council representatives. This acknowledges receipt of your declaration, dated Galactic Standard 493028. Earth's Diplomatic Corps proposes discussions regarding this matter in approximately 6 standard months, pending completion of current scientific initiatives. Please find attached our standard conflict resolution framework for your review. We appreciate your patience during this exciting period of discovery." Transmission ends. As the message concluded, a data packet containing over 3,000 pages of diplomatic protocols, historical precedents, and administrative forms began downloading to the Council's system. General Zulk stared at the completion bar slowly advancing across the screen. 6 months. They want us to wait 6 months. What could possibly be more important than responding to our declaration of war? The observant's soft laughter held no humor. "That, General, is precisely what we need to find out." High Admiral Zixtaki stood on the bridge of the indomitable righteousness, his ceremonial armor catching the light from nearby stars. The view screen displayed a tactical map of Earth's primary trade routes, now dominated by the blue icons representing his armada. "The blockade is complete," his first officer reported. 200 vessels at strategic choke points. No human ship can reach their colonies without detection. Dexteki nodded, his cranial ridges expanding with pride. After the embarrassment at Ta City, the Council had finally committed its full military might. This was no longer a demonstration. This was a proper blockade that would strangle Earth's economy and force the humans to acknowledge the reality of their situation. The humans rely heavily on resource shipments from their outer colonies, he explained to the assembled command staff. Their homeworld cannot sustain their population without these supply lines. Within weeks, they will face shortages. Within months, crisis. They will have no choice but to negotiate. But junior officer approached, her scales pale with anxiety. Admiral, we're detecting an approaching vessel. Classification: uncertain. Show me, Dexteki ordered. The tactical display zoomed in to reveal a small ship approaching the blockade line. Its design was unlike the utilitarian transport vessels they had expected. This craft was sleek, almost artistic in its construction. Curious, muttered the admiral. Hail them. After a moment, the communications officer shook his head. They're receiving but not responding, sir. Deploy interceptors. Standard containment protocol. 6 fighter craft detached from nearby cruisers, moving to surround the intruder. The strange vessel continued its approach, making no attempt to change course or increase speed. Sir, the sensor officer called. The vessel is registered as a private transport. Owner identification: Isabella Cruz, Earth citizen, age 73 local years. Dexteki frowned. A single elder human challenges our blockade. Scan for weapons. None detected. Minimal shielding. It appears to be exactly what it claims to be. The admiral watched with growing unease as the small craft approached the blockade perimeter. The interceptors moved to position, broadcasting final warnings. Then, chaos erupted. The human vessel suddenly accelerated to speeds the tactical computers struggled to track. It wove between the interceptors with precision that seemed to defy physics, causing 2 fighters to collide as they attempted to pursue. The remaining interceptors fired warning shots, but the transport slipped between energy bursts as if they were stationary objects. Impossible, whispered the weapons officer. Our targeting systems can't lock on. It's as if the vessel is anticipating our firing solutions. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the small craft threaded its way through the heart of the blockade formation, causing confusion and near collisions among the council vessels, but somehow avoiding any actual damage. As suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The transport emerged on the other side of the blockade, resuming its previous speed as it continued toward the Jupiter colonies. We're receiving a transmission, announced the communications officer, sounding bewildered. A holographic image appeared, an elderly human female with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She sat in a pilot's chair surrounded by what appeared to be colorfully wrapped packages. Hello, dears, she said pleasantly. This is Captain Isabella Cruz of the transport Abuela's Delivery. I noticed you've parked quite a lot of ships across my usual route. I'm on a bit of a schedule. My grandchildren on Europa are expecting their birthday presents. She gestured to the packages behind her. Your formation has some structural weaknesses. By the way, I'm sending your admiral the data from my nav computer. Might help you arrange things more efficiently next time. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sir, the tactical officer finally said, 17 other human vessels have just altered course. They appear to be following the exact path this transport used through our formation. Dexteki stared at the tactical display where a small blinking icon representing the Abuela's Delivery continued unhindered toward Jupiter. Readjust the formation, he ordered quietly, and send a priority message to the Council. We may need to reconsider our approach. The Grand Reception Hall of the Galactic Council headquarters had never hosted a human delegation before. Its soaring crystalline arches, designed to accommodate species ranging from the microscopic Quantary to the massive gas forms of the Jovian Collective, now witnessed the arrival of Earth's first official response to the war declaration. Council Security Director Vrexnall observed the approaching human vessel through narrowed compound eyes. After 6 months of blockades, covert operations, and increasingly desperate strategic planning, the humans had finally acknowledged the conflict. The director allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Council's pressure had worked. That satisfaction evaporated as the human diplomatic shuttle docked. Rather than the military vessel he had expected, this was a sleek civilian craft emblazoned with corporate logos and what appeared to be tourism advertisements for Earth landmarks. "Curious design choices for a surrender delegation," muttered his deputy. The airlock cycled open, and Security Director Vrexnall stiffened in surprise. Instead of a small group of dejected officials, a veritable flood of humans emerged. They wore varied attire, some in formal diplomatic dress, others in business attire, and still others in what appeared to be casual clothing with embedded technology. At their head walked a tall human female in an iridescent suit that seemed to shift colors based on which species was looking at it. "Greetings," she said, approaching the reception committee. "I am lead negotiator Sophia Okonkwo, representing the United Earth Government's Special Diplomatic Response Team." Vrexnall's mandibles clicked in the formal greeting pattern. "The Council acknowledges your arrival. We are prepared to discuss the terms off." "Wonderful," Okonkwo interrupted with a brilliant smile. "We have so much to discuss. But first, introductions." She gestured to the crowd behind her. "My legal team, cultural liaisons, trade representatives, historical archivists, sino-linguistic specialists, and of course, our interns. All these people for surrender negotiations." Vrexnall asked, bewildered. Okonkwo's laughter filled the reception hall. "Surrender? Oh my, there seems to be a misunderstanding. We're here to present our comprehensive framework for normalization of relations and reciprocal understanding." She turned and nodded to a human male who approached pushing what appeared to be an anti-gravity cart stacked with physical document containers. "This is just the preliminary documentation," she explained. "The executive summary, supporting appendices, historical precedents, and proposed implementation schedules." Vrexnall stared at the towering stack of containers. "How many pages?" "Just under 11,000 for the core document," Okonkwo replied cheerfully. "Though with the referenced materials and required disclosure forms, it's closer to 50,000. We've included versions adapted for all Council species legal traditions, of course." The security director's exoskeleton creaked as he shifted uncomfortably. "The Council War Ministry expects a simple acknowledgement of defeat, not this." "War Ministry?" Okonkwo's expression conveyed polite confusion. "Oh, there seems to be another misunderstanding. According to our organizational charts, we're scheduled to meet with the Council's Department of Interspecies Cultural Affairs, the Conflict Resolution Subdivision, specifically." She consulted a holographic display that shimmered above her wrist. "We have the diplomatic accreditation codes right here, approved 6 standard months ago by your own bureaucracy." Vrexnall frantically accessed his own communication device, scrolling through authorizations. To his horror, he found the approval, countersigned by 7 different council departments, none of which were the War Ministry. "There must be some mistake," he insisted. "Not at all," Okonkwo assured him. "Everything is in order. Now shall we proceed to the conference facilities? Our cultural exchange team has prepared samples of Earth cuisine adapted for all Council biochemistries, and we're eager to begin the ceremonial gift presentations." She gestured, and several humans stepped forward holding elaborately wrapped packages. "We've brought traditional items from Earth's various regions," she continued. "Nothing builds understanding like sharing cultural treasures. Don't you agree?" As the human delegation swept forward into the Council headquarters like an unstoppable tide of paperwork and pleasantries, Vrexnall realized with growing dread that this was not the defeat he had anticipated. This was an invasion of an entirely different kind. Intelligence Officer Rectal pulled his adaptive camouflage cloak tighter as he moved through the lower levels of Nexus Prime. The capital world's undercity was a maze of service tunnels, abandoned infrastructure, and black market establishments that catered to desires the council officially pretended didn't exist. Rectal's mission was simple: identify the source of human contraband flooding council space. For 3 standard months, the Counterintelligence Division had tracked increasing instances of Earth cultural artifacts appearing throughout council territories, despite the blockade. What had begun as a trickle was now a flood. His contact had directed him to a particular service corridor in Sector 87, promising information about a major distribution hub. As he approached the designated coordinates, Rectal noticed the subtle vibrations in the deck plating beneath his feet, rhythmic pulses that grew stronger as he advanced. The corridor ended at what appeared to be a maintenance hatch, unmarked except for a small symbol etched into the metal, a simplified outline of the human homeworld. Rectal hesitated, then pressed his identification chip against the scanner hidden beside the hatch. After a moment, the heavy door slid open, releasing a wave of sound, scent, and light that nearly overwhelmed his senses. Inside was a vast chamber that had once been a power distribution nexus. Now it pulsed with multicolored illumination synchronized to the thundering beats of what could only be human music. Hundreds of beings from dozens of council species moved in rhythmic patterns throughout the space, many wearing clothing that mimicked human fashions. "First time at an Earth club?" asked a voice beside him. Rectal turned to find a young Vorlaxian female, her natural bioluminescence altered to mimic human neon patterns. Her skin glowed with geometric designs that shifted in time with the music. "I'm just looking around," he replied, careful to maintain his cover identity. "Everyone's just looking around their first time," she said with a knowing smile. "Don't worry. Council security rarely bothers with us anymore. Too many of their own come here off-duty." She gestured toward a far corner where a group of beings huddled around what appeared to be a viewing terminal. "They're watching a live broadcast from Earth, something called the Galactic Appreciation Festival. Apparently, humans are celebrating council cultures now." Rectal moved closer, his intelligence training momentarily forgotten in his curiosity. The terminal displayed crowds of humans in various public spaces across Earth, many wearing crude but recognizable costumes representing council species. Street vendors sold food items labeled with alien names, while information booths offered language lessons in Galactic Standard. "Is that High Chancellor Vexron?" he asked, pointing to a human child wearing an elaborate costume with cranial ridges and ceremonial armor. The costume contest winner, yes, his Vorlaxian guide confirmed. Apparently their spacecraft modeling competition was won by a replica of the Indomitable Righteousness, the flagship of your blockade fleet. Rectal froze. "How did you know I'm connected to?" "Please," she interrupted with a dismissive gesture. "Your camouflage tech is at least 2 generations behind what we see and hear every night. Besides, you walk like military." She leaned closer, her bioluminescence dimming to a confidential glow. "You should know that fighting humans is pointless. They don't conquer, they assimilate. My broodmate works in Central Archives. Yesterday she processed 17 separate requests from council officials for access to human historical records. They're studying Earth's trade negotiation techniques." Rectal looked around the chamber with new understanding. This wasn't just a cultural contamination point. It was a full-scale cultural conversion hub, operating in the heart of the Council's capital world. "How long has this been happening?" he asked. The Vorlaxian's patterns shifted to what might have been amusement. "Since before your war began. This." She gestured around the club. "This is just the public face. The real exchange happens in research labs, trading houses, and yes, even council chambers." She handed him a small device. "Human music. Over 8,000 compositions. Careful, it's addictive." As Rectal slipped the contraband into his pocket, he realized his mission report would need significant revision. This wasn't a security breach to be contained. It was a cultural revolution that had already succeeded. 300 meters beneath the rusty surface of Mars, Dr. Elena Mbeki stood in the heart of the Bradbury Research Complex, a sprawling subterranean facility that had become humanity's most important scientific installation almost overnight. The central chamber, dubbed the conversation pit by the research team, hummed with the synchronized operation of quantum resonators, reality anchors, and communication systems unlike anything humanity had built before. Recording session 47 beginning now, announced the facility's eye. Quantum coherence at 98.3%. Translation matrices primed. Elena took a deep breath, centering herself before another communication attempt with the silicon-based microorganisms they'd discovered 9 months earlier. What had begun as an anomalous reading from a deep core sample had evolved into the most significant xenobiological discovery in human history. Initiating contact, she said. The chamber's specialized equipment pulsed in rhythmic patterns, sending precisely calibrated signals into the specially prepared culture medium that contained a small colony of the Martian microbes. The organisms responded instantly, their crystalline structures rearranging to form patterns that the translation system gradually converted into comprehensible data. They're responding more quickly now, noted Dr. Sanjay Kapoor, the team's quantum linguist. The translation software is stabilizing. The main display filled with a cascade of images, mathematical symbols, and what appeared to be fragments of star charts spanning billions of years. Ask them about their creators again, Elena suggested. Sanjay adjusted the input parameters, and the system transmitted the query. The response came faster than in any previous session, a flood of information that caused several subsystems to temporarily overload. Incredible, whispered Elena, as the data resolved into coherent patterns. They're not just giving us the information. They're improving our translation algorithms to help us understand it better. The display stabilized, revealing a coherent narrative told in a combination of images and translated text. The silicon microbes hadn't evolved naturally. They were created as a biological archive by an ancient spacefaring civilization that had encountered something they called simply the void between galaxies. These can't be right, Sanjay murmured, studying the astronomical data. According to these records, entire galactic clusters have disappeared from regions of space where they should exist. Not disappeared, corrected Elena, her voice hushed with the weight of realization. Consumed. As they processed this information, a priority alert chimed through the facility's communication system. The facility director's hologram appeared beside them. Dr. Mbeki, I've just received word from Earth Defense. The Council blockade fleet is breaking formation. Multiple vessels are attempting to scan our facility. Elena nodded, unsurprised. They must have intercepted fragments of our findings. Their deep space monitoring network would have detected our quantum resonance tests. Should we be concerned? The director asked. No, Elena replied, studying the new data streaming across the display. They're frightened, not aggressive. According to the archive, several council species have ancestral memories of the void, encoded warnings passed down through cultural myths or genetic memory. She gestured to a particular section of the translation. The microbes are telling us that their creators didn't just encounter the void. They fought it, using technology beyond anything we've conceived. And they left this archive on Mars specifically for us to find. For humans? Why? Elena's expression was solemn as she pointed to the final section of the translation. Because their calculations predicted humanity would develop in this solar system, with specific characteristics making us uniquely capable of understanding their technology. They didn't just leave a warning. They left instructions. The facility floor trembled slightly as another alert sounded. Multiple council vessels requesting permission to enter Mars orbit, reported the facility director. They're not making threats. They're requesting scientific asylum. Elena smiled faintly. The war just became irrelevant, didn't it? What do we do now? Asked Sanjay. Elena turned back to the display where the ancient message continued to unfold. Now, we do what humans have always done best. We adapt, We build, and we prepare to face something far bigger than our petty conflicts. As if in response, the silicon microbes pulsed with renewed activity, projecting what appeared to be schematics for technologies beyond current human understanding. The legacy of a civilization that had recognized humanity's potential millions of years before the first human ever gazed at the stars. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so silent. Representatives of 300 species sat motionless as the holographic projection of Dr. Elena Mbeki rotated slowly in the center of the room, accompanied by visualizations of data retrieved from the Martian archive. High Chancellor Vexran, who had opened the war with such certainty, now leaned forward in his ceremonial seat, the bioluminescent patterns beneath his translucent skin pulsing with a mixture of fear and fascination. "You're certain of these findings?" he asked, breaking the prolonged silence. Elena nodded. "The evidence is conclusive. The entity referred to as the void between galaxies isn't metaphorical. It's a non-baryonic organism that exists primarily in what we've been calling dark energy states. According to the archive, it has consumed 3 galaxies in the last billion years." The visualization shifted to show astronomical data, vast regions of space where galactic clusters should exist, but didn't, their absence now explained not by cosmological models, but by something far more terrifying: predation on a cosmic scale. "And this entity is approaching our galaxy?" asked the Triptarian delegate, all 3 of her heads speaking in horrified unison. "Not actively approaching," Elena clarified. "Currently, it exists in what the archive describes as a dormant state at the edge of our galactic cluster. The ancient civilization that created the Martian archive developed technologies to detect and potentially deter it, should it awaken." A murmur rippled through the chamber as delegates conferred with their advisors and transmitted urgent updates to their homeworlds. "Dr. Mbeki," Vexran said, activating his formal communication node, "humanity has faced our aggression with remarkable restraint. I must ask, why bring this knowledge to us? Why not use it as leverage against the Council after our declaration of war?" Elena's hologram smiled slightly. "Chancellor, humanity has faced extinction-level threats throughout our history, most self-inflicted. We've learned that survival isn't a zero-sum game. The archive wasn't left for humans alone. It was left for all sentient life in this galaxy." She gestured to someone off projection, and the visualization changed to show a new image. A massive research facility under construction in Mars orbit, its design clearly incorporating both human and Council architectural elements. "This is the Joint Species Research Initiative," she explained. "Construction began 3 weeks ago, utilizing designs from the archive, combined with the expertise of scientists from 27 different species, including the Council researchers who sought asylum on Mars." The image expanded to show ships from both human and Council worlds moving in coordinated patterns around the facility, their weapon systems either removed or reconfigured for scientific purposes. "We propose formalizing this collaboration," Elena continued. "The archive contains technologies beyond either of our current understandings, but by working together, we've already made significant progress." Chancellor Vexran studied the projection for a long moment, then did something unprecedented in Council history. He stepped down from his elevated platform and stood directly before Elena's hologram, placing himself symbolically at her level. "What happens to our state of war?" he asked quietly. Elena's expression remained gentle but firm. "With respect, Chancellor, I think we've all moved beyond that particular distraction." Without waiting for the formal procedures that had governed Council decisions for millennia, Vexran turned to address the Assembly. "I propose an immediate reallocation of all military resources currently engaged in the human conflict to the Joint Species Research Initiative." "The war is," he hesitated, searching for the right terminology. "Administratively deprioritized," suggested Elena. "Precisely." Vexran agreed with what might have been the Arcturian equivalent of a smile. As the Council erupted into a flurry of activity, resource commitments, and logistical planning, Alina's hologram maintained its calm presence at the center of the storm. Her team on Mars had already moved on to the next phase of research, focused on the ancient technologies that might one day save them all. The war that the Council had started with such gravity had ended not with surrender documents or peace treaties, but with something far more powerful. A shared purpose that made their previous conflict seem as insignificant as the humans had treated it all along.